Hey, welcome back. This is part 11 of the Space Between YouTube series in which we are exploring the space between the Hebrew and the Christian scriptures. Give you a little bit of a recap. Last week there was this battle between two brothers, Aristobulus II and Hyrcanus II, who could not decide who should be in charge of Judea. And so they called on Rome, and the general Pompey came in and he said, you know what? I'll be in charge of Judea. And I'm going to make Hyrcanus II the high priest because I can control him. And I'll make this guy Antipater be the governor of Judea because he's done a pretty good job. And Aristobulus, you're out of here. You're gone. And that seemed like it worked pretty well for about 23 years until Aristobulus' son enlisted the help of another empire out to the east and conquered Judea and took over and declared himself the king and high priest. And you know who was not a huge fan of this development? Was Antipater's son, Herod, who had been the governor of Galilee up north and was an ambitious young man. And so Herod sailed to Rome and pled his case to the Senate, and the Senate made him, surprisingly, the king of the Jews and sent him back to Judea with a large army to conquer and recapture the city. And from then on out, the reign of the Hasmonean dynasty was over. And now Herod, who was an Idumean, not even really a Judean, was now king over Judea. And this began his 35-year reign, which would see unparalleled building projects, modernization, and prosperity. It also saw massive civil unrest, state-sanctioned brutality, and rampant income inequality. And Herod is such a polarizing character for historians, and his reign was so long that we could take months just digging through all of that to figure out who this guy was. But we only have one session. So instead of taking you through all of the nitty-gritty of this man's very interesting life, I want to focus on three themes that I think are important about the life and reign of Herod that connect directly to Jesus and the rest of the New Testament. And those are that Herod was the king of the Jews. That phrase is important. He was an amazing builder, and he was a great diplomat. So, first, the king of the Jews. You may remember reading in Matthew 2 when the Magi come to Herod because they saw the star in the east and they saw that there was a new king of the Jews born to Judea. And Herod was greatly afraid, and all of Judea with him, is what the text says. And all of Judea was afraid because Herod was not giving up this title. This was a title that he fought for. He went to war for several times, and he was not going to give this up without a fight. Herod was nothing if not a survivor and somebody who clung to every single opportunity for power. For example, he wanted to try to unify the people who were still traditionalist, who wanted to see the Hasmoneans still be on the throne and not some Idumean guy. And so he married a woman named Mariamne, who was the granddaughter of Hyrcanus II, that priest that got kicked out and then brought back and then kicked out again. And so this way he would be in with the Jewish nationalists and the upper class. And that relationship didn't work out so well. That family did not really care for him. He actually brought back Hyrcanus II out of exile and lavished him with all these gifts, but then he heard a rumor that Hyrcanus was planning to overthrow him, and so he had him killed. The 80-year-old man who was the high priest like 3 different times had him murdered. He briefly then made his brother-in-law the high priest to try to smooth things over, but his brother-in-law was young and really good-looking and charismatic, and when he presided over the sacrifice, all of the ladies swooned and everyone loved him. And so Herod got really jealous and had him, accidentally drowned while people were playing in a pool. Yeah, he also executed his mother-in-law, his uncle, 3 of his sons, and then his beloved wife Mariamne, after somebody told him that they had heard that she was unfaithful. This is the kind of guy that he was. He even tried to assassinate Cleopatra one time when she was visiting because he hated her so much and she was encroaching on his territory. And his people were like, Herod, you can't just assassinate the Pharaoh when she comes and visits you. You don't have that kind of power. But this is who Herod was and how he was going to hold on so firmly to power, no matter who was up against him or what it cost him personally and professionally. And while most scholars agree that the whole Herod killing all of the babies under 2 in Bethlehem after the Magi left, that whole story in Matthew is probably not totally historically accurate, because that sort of a story you'd think would have been picked up by one of the many historians who wrote about him, or even Luke in the other gospel, and we only get it in Matthew. So that probably did not happen, at least not in the way that it is described in Matthew. But Matthew's able to say that story because it's not so far-fetched that it would happen. And what Matthew's doing here, Matthew is writing mainly to a Jewish population, and so Matthew is trying to make an allusion here to Pharaoh. He wants you to see Herod as the next Pharaoh and Jesus as the next Moses, as in the violent autocratic dictator who is vicious and bloodthirsty and will do whatever to hold the throne, and then the savior of God's people born in humble circumstances who then rises up and helps free the people. Like, Matthew's trying to help you to see that story, and so that's where this is coming from. But like I said, the point is that this would not have been out of character. When Herod was on his deathbed, he ordered that dozens and dozens of the most beloved leaders in Judea be brought and imprisoned in the hippodrome, so that when he died, those people would be executed and that there would be actual mourning in Judea, because he was afraid people wouldn't mourn his death. This is who we're dealing with. So this is also the big joke when the Romans put the King of the Jews on Jesus' cross, because Herod was the last king of the Jews. There's no more after him. And he never, ever backed down from a fight, and he never lost. And he ruled with an iron fist. And Jesus, meanwhile, was seemingly weak and ineffectual. He couldn't call down the angels to pull him down off of the cross. He never harmed a single soul. He was this pacifist teacher from the north. The gospel writers want you to see Jesus as the antithesis of Herod. That the King of the Jews who rules by heavenly rules, not by earthly rules. More on that later. Because number 2, Herod was a great builder. He was an architecture guy. He transformed Judea into one of the most impressively modern regions in the Mediterranean. He hired the top architects from Alexandria and Athens to come into Judea and to create these massive structures. He used the most modern technology of underwater setting concrete, which only recently we rediscovered how they did that, and he built this amazing port city that became a big trading center that was not too far from Galilee, so this would have been something that Jesus probably interacted with at some point. He transformed Jericho into one of the most luxurious vacation destinations in the region for all of the wealthy and well-to-do. He expanded the Temple Mount until it was something that was so glorious and full of splendor that people traveled for thousands of miles just to see it. The Wailing Wall that you may have seen people at in Jerusalem is one of the only parts that's left of this temple. And if you see the size of those stones, it is unbelievable how much work and engineering went into this. And then he built himself a giant marble palace and about half a dozen of these fortresses on top of mountains to protect himself and others should there be another uprising, because of course there's going to be another uprising. He built an amphitheater in Jerusalem so there could be these Greek plays. He rebuilt Samaria. He built these huge roads and aqueducts. And all of this had a profound effect on the average person. We talked before about how a lot of these sort of political maneuverings here and there really only affect some people, and like the farmer out in Judea wouldn't have really noticed. But this is the sort of thing that affected everyone across the board. Because in order to pay for all of this construction, he raised taxes like crazy. He taxed the life out of the people, which, and to his credit, when there were times of famine, he cut taxes and he paid for food out of his own treasury. So he wasn't totally heartless, and he was a good ruler in that regard. But in order to pay for this, he had to tax people extensively. Now, it also created a ton of jobs in construction, in tourism, in trade. This new infrastructure would have increased the productivity of all of the farms and all the industries. And so a lot of people made a lot of money during Herod's reign. But it also meant that there was this incredible new tax burden on people that were not benefiting from this new economy. And so you'll remember that at this point, there's already vast sectarian issues between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Jews and the Samaritans, the traditionalists and the Hellenistic Jews. There's all of these divides already. And so rampant income inequality is one of those things that has a tendency in history to ignite a tinderbox. And this will be shortly coming. I don't want to spoil the ending, but it doesn't all go well at the end. And number 3, he was a really great diplomat. You'll remember Herod's father, Antipater. He was allied with Pompey. He made him governor after all. But then when Pompey lost, he went on Julius Caesar's side, became Caesar's best friend. And Herod did the same. He was initially best buddies with Mark Antony and helped him and supported him through everything. But when it became clear that Mark Antony was going to lose, he switched sides and he went to Caesar Augustus and he said, "Hey, I am unapologetically an ally of your enemy. I have been the most supportive ally that I can be to Mark Antony, and I will make no apology for that because that's who I am. I would like to offer you that same loyalty and services if you would have me." And Caesar Augustus was just so impressed by this guy's moxie, and also they bonded over their mutual hatred for Cleopatra, and so he gave him all kinds of benefits, both him personally and Judea. He gave Herod even more territory, which he took from Cleopatra. He allowed Judea total autonomy from Roman rule. So whatever they wanted to do, they could do as long as it was still in the interests of Rome. He removed all Roman taxation from the people so that would alleviate some of the tax burdens. And he gave the freedom to practice the Jewish religion across the entire Roman Empire. So in every single region where there are diaspora Jews, they were allowed legally to practice their religion, and there could be no laws made that prohibited the Jewish practice of religion. This is really important because for the first 100 years or so of the church, they weren't considered a new religion. They were just considered a different sect of Judaism. And so this is one of the reasons why the early church was able to spread so quickly and spread so far and wide across these wonderfully, beautifully new Roman roads, because they could practice in public. It wasn't until later that they distanced themselves from the Jewish faith that they then had to go into hiding and they were persecuted because the Romans had rules against new religions. So his Roman connections also got him into trouble. At one point, he erected a giant golden eagle in honor of Caesar on the front of the temple gates. And obviously the people who were traditionalists and people who did not want to see the government and their practice of their religion intermingled, were very upset, and a group of them climbed up and cut it down and destroyed it, and there were riots in the cities because the temple is God's house, not Rome's house. So, to summarize, Herod's reign directly ushers in the beginning of the New Testament. He was a brutal strongman who seized power during a time of turmoil and chaos, and his ruthless style of governance instilled fear and inspired all kinds of stories of cruelty and jealousy, some of them true, some of them embellished. And his extensive building projects made Judea one of the most modern and prosperous places in the region. It also expanded the wealth gap, and his taxation was an incredible burden on the lower class, the working class people, especially up in Galilee. His relationship with Rome gave the Jewish people stability and freedom, unparalleled access to the Mediterranean, but it also furthered this growing gap between the traditional Jews and the Hellenized Jews, or the Greekified Jews, or the Romanized, whatever, Jews. The Magi heralded Jesus as the King of the Jews, which was Herod's title. And we are supposed to see Jesus in stark contrast to Herod. Because unlike Herod, Jesus rules through self-sacrifice and service to others. Jesus reaches out specifically to the poor and to the marginalized and basically ignores the rich and the powerful. Jesus does not strike back against his enemies and meets their violence with love. Jesus cleanses the temple instead of further Romanizing it. And so we are meant to see Jesus as the anti-Herod in many ways. And so a lot of the ways that the gospel writers will choose to portray Jesus is meant to call to mind who Herod was. And so as you may have noticed, we're no longer in the space between. We started there, but now at the end of this episode, we are now firmly in New Testament territory. And so for the final 3 weeks of this series, we're going to be there. We're not going to be in between anymore. We're going to be in the New Testament. And we're going to flesh out some of the political and the social events that are happening behind the scenes that aren't mentioned in the New Testament, that provide a backdrop to Jesus' childhood, to his adolescence, to his adulthood, and to the first generation of the church. We're going to meet a lot of familiar faces, but hopefully we'll be able to see them in brand new ways. I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you then.